Jack Cafferty's here with the Cafferty File. Jack.
There are growing signs that the federal government wants more control over the Internet. For starters, a bipartisan Senate bill would give the president a so-called Internet kill switch, which would allow the president to control or even shut down the Internet in the event of an emergency. Senator Joe Lieberman's a co-sponsor of this. He says that America's economic security, national security, and public safety are all at risk from new kinds of enemies like cyber terrorists. Lieberman says that's why the government needs more control over the Internet in what he calls times of war. Critics worry about the level of control the bill would give to the president, and they claim it could have unintended consequences. Speaking of terrorism, the Homeland Security Department says the United States has got to do more to monitor terrorist groups that use the Internet to recruit and train. DHS Secretary Janet Napolitano says the government needs to find the right balance between protecting individuals' rights to privacy and keeping the country safe. This comes on the heels of several domestic terror attacks in which the Internet played a key role. It's believed the terrorists in both the Fort Hood shooting and the attempted bombing of Times Square were inspired by online postings of Islamic extremists. And finally, the Federal Communications Commission is getting into the act, too, taking steps toward more Internet regulation. Last week, the FCC voted to formally consider tighter control over high-speed Internet companies. Until now, these companies have operated with virtually no government oversight. So here's the question. How much power should the government have when it comes to the Internet? Go to CNN.com/Cafferty File. Post a comment on my blog.
Jack Cafferty, thank you. Good question. Jack's back with the Cafferty File. Jack.
Question this hour is how much power should the government have when it comes to the Internet? Kathy writes, a kill switch is totally dangerous regarding freedom of speech. Like, totally. The Internet gives us all access to the outside world immediately. Open outside communication keeps nations and governments somewhat honest. Our media is already compromised with biased accounts of stories. Our history books are being rewritten by conservative, short-sighted idiots. And now we are going to allow a politician the right to control the Internet? What crisis should be so bad as to shut down our access to news and communication? Steve in Virginia writes, the government should have sufficient involvement in the Internet to ascertain security threats, address security threats, eliminate security threats to the American people. The Internet moves our U.S. borders within the homes of every American citizen who has a computer. Thomas writes, so now that China's overtaking us as the manufacturing leader, we're going to try to be more like them with greater government restrictions on the Internet. I find it funny the government's trying to exert more control over our citizens, and yet they shy away from controlling the illegal immigration issue. Greg in Minneapolis says, had this been George W. Bush proposing a government kill switch on the Internet, the impeachment proceedings would be well underway. We don't need Big Brother having anything to do with the Internet. The only reason there is to put in a kill switch is to deal with dissenting opinions in the only way they can, rather than counter them with their own arguments. Mark in Houston writes, the outcry coming from those who use freedom of speech as an excuse to abuse our rights will be louder than those horns at the World Cup. We live in an age of fast-changing, advancing threats to this country. If shutting down the net serves a justified purpose in any one of those situations, then go for it. However, I can't think of too many people in elected office that I would trust with that control. And Jack in Florida writes, the government gets to control the flow of information. Have you ever read 1984, Jack? No president, Democrat or Republican, should ever have that power. If you want to read more on the subject, you'll find it on my blog at cnn.com/Cafferty File.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks very much.